Welcome back, or if it's your first time, I'm glad to have you here. I'm Matt Fendora, and you're tuned in to the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, where we journey together toward becoming the best version of ourselves. Using mind, body, heart, and spirit as the anchors of our podcast, join me as we set sail into the depths of self-discovery, unraveling the interconnected layers that shape our growth. If you resonate with today's conversation, consider subscribing to the podcast. Your support means the world to us and ensures you never miss an empowering episode. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, a podcast all about being the best version of yourself through mind, body, heart, and spirit. Today I am joined by Nikki Nicholas. Nikki is a life transformation coach and a mental and emotional wellness expert. She uses her deep understanding of the subconscious mind to uncover and remove the negative subconscious patterns that are holding people back in life, specifically gearing her work towards people who are going through life's toughest challenges. Some of Nikki's proudest accomplishments include modeling in China and throughout Canada, doing music promotion for reggae rock-style bands throughout the US and Canada, rescuing puppies from reserves she worked on in Alberta. She found homes for 10 puppies who were starving to death by knocking on friends' doors and asking if they wanted the puppy in her arms. Singing, teaching herself how to build websites back in 2007, which qualified her to work as a front-end website developer and online marketer for a global corporation for almost a decade without any formal schooling. She was a digital project manager for one of the largest ad agencies in the world. She's been studying the subconscious mind since 2007, rather obsessively, and spent 1.5 years meditating for 10 or more hours a day in order to understand and release her own negative subconscious patterns, which is what gives her such an in-depth understanding of how to do it for other people. And maybe most significantly, she did a complete 180-degree turn in her life, and even though it was really hard to go through, she learned and grew so much from it. It shaped who she is today and how she's been able to help others. What makes her heart sing? Doing a subconscious block removal session on someone and having their problem completely go away, especially when it's a problem they've had their whole life and haven't been able to get past. Singing, having deep conversations with people, and of course, dogs and puppies. Without further ado, here's Nikki. How are you doing today, Nikki?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. Really excited because I feel like this is something that I'm not very familiar with, and I think it's an important tool to have as a coach. And then on top of that, as just a person in general, the ability to work through something that we most definitely have, we just don't realize we have it.
100%. Yeah, it's very powerful to basically know that no matter what is obstructing you in life, whether it's internal or external, you have the tools to release it and move past it. And then it doesn't, I guess, hinder you from, creating the life that you want. So absolutely.
So you said you've been studying the unconscious mind since 2007. What
Mhm.
what started that journey for you?
So essentially, I've always kind of been fascinated about psychology, but I wasn't really sure how to go about getting into that realm of things after high school. And so I just kind of took a regular job, just, I was actually reading gas meters randomly. And in that job, I got to just listen to audiobooks like all day, every day, because I was just walking, and or driving. And I picked up a ton of Tony Robbins books.
Mm.
And what he was talking about was so fascinating when it came to the subconscious mind or the unconscious mind. I use those terms interchangeably. So basically, just when I say that, I mean anything that is not within your conscious awareness as it happens. So listening to Tony Robbins audiobooks, he talked quite extensively about NLP. And I was like, oh, what's this NLP thing? This sounds fascinating. So just dove into that and just got pretty much sucked into that world and just absolutely fell in love with it and became so obsessed with learning about it that I took, honestly, I took so many NLP courses online, practitioner trainings and master practitioner trainings. I would listen to them over and over and over and over and over again because every time I did, I would learn more and just have new realizations, new depths of understanding. And as I did that, again, just got more into the hypnotherapy side and just different modalities and different extensions of NLP. And then I think it was 2017, I took my first in-person NLP course. And that was absolutely mind-blowing because it was it was the first time I was around other students who we could practice on each other. And I had my teacher, my instructor, who actually would put us under trance, do hypnotherapy and NLP techniques on us. And that course absolutely completely changed my life, because basically that work that she did on the students, on us during that course, that made me realize that I needed to do a complete 180-degree turn of my life. It's almost like the subconscious side of me was being spoken to. Well, it's literally like that's what happened. And that subconscious part of me, unbeknownst to me, consciously was like, okay, nope, you're going to go over here now, like totally 180 degree. And I just kind of had to follow along. And it's led me gradually into this path, which is essentially more aligned with who I am, what really fulfills me in life, and what I truly want. So just living authentically now based on that prior experience.
What was that initial subconscious block that you had to remove to continue moving forward?
So what it was essentially I was listening to society my entire life about, okay, you need to get a good job, you need to make a lot of money, you need safety and security in that job. It's just about making money. That's it. And essentially, when I was that meter reader, I actually taught myself how to build websites throughout the years because I loved the entrepreneurial side of things. And so I was doing that on the side and made 7 websites. They were bringing in a good amount of money. And then as that happened, that actually gave me the qualifications to get a job within that same company as that web developer and online marketer. So that was really cool. Sorry, what was the question? The specific question that you had?
What was the initial subconscious block that you had to remove to continue moving forward?
Mm, okay, so that's what it is. So essentially, I was following that path. I was following the 9 to 5 corporate job. I had a relationship that was amazing, but I also held myself back so substantially because of it. And I was in that relationship for 15 years, starting when I was 16 years old. So I felt like I didn't experience a lot of life. And I'd always felt that in the background, but I absolutely loved my life. I loved my husband at the time, and I like couldn't imagine not being with him. But I still had this thing knocking at the back of my head kind of thing, like at all times going, there's more that you're meant to do in so many ways in life, and you're not doing it. And it's out of fear of being alone, fear of leaving him, fear of, everything, fear of leaving my comfort, my rock, my security, which is, the corporate office, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, you should want this life, like the buy a house, picket fence, all this, and, safety and security. But there was something more that I wasn't experiencing, and I didn't know what it was. And that's the hard part, is when you can feel it, you can sense it, that you're supposed to be in some other kind of life, but you don't know what it is, and you can't describe it, you don't understand it yourself, so you can't explain it. But that's essentially what it was. So it was like kind of not just one block, it was like, and that's why my entire life was that 180-degree flip, is that everything in my life kind of had to change, aside from those things that I was really, really passionate about, like the subconscious mind and helping people and just diving into that entrepreneurial world, and then exploring the rest of life that I felt like I hadn't gotten to explore. So in 2017, that's when, that flip happened. And ever since, basically, I call it my spiritual awakening in 2017. And that's when I just honestly went internal and just used all the techniques that I had learned over the years from NLP, hypnotherapy. But then I started diving into, I had never been spiritual or, into that kind of stuff prior. But then I started to kind of meet new people who were into that stuff, and they kind of showed me different modalities, different things about like energy and inner healing and stuff like that. So then I started adding meditation and mindfulness to my practice. And I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat called Vipassana, where you had to basically pretend that you were in complete isolation by yourself, but you were around a ton of people at the same time doing the same thing. So like you couldn't talk to them, you couldn't look them in the eye, you couldn't like associate with them or anything like that. You just had to pretend to be there by yourself for 10 days just to meditate the entire time. And that was a really, really cool experience. And that really led me into going internal, again, using my knowledge of the subconscious mind in order to do essentially shadow work, to release all these horrible feelings that came up from shifting my life so much. Because like when you have that perfect life and the comfort and the security that you have and the connections you have, and then you give it up, it's kind of like you become, the way I described it, like nothing and no one. And I was like building my new life. And so then spent a year and a half meditating for 10 plus hours a day, just doing that, going internal, releasing, and just uncovered so much. Like I had fear of judgment, fear of being alone, like all these feelings that got stirred up through this shift. And every single one of them I had to go into. And I know now, like thinking of my life path, it's like if I hadn't gone into that, then I wouldn't be able to help people do the same thing from an experiential standpoint. Because it's like, it's one thing to learn about it conceptually with your conscious mind, your intellect. It's a completely different thing to actually do it, live it every single day. It's kind of like when you learn to ride a bike, you can physically do it or you can read about it. And it's like, if you then go to teach someone how to ride a bike, which one is going to be the best for teaching them had
Mhm.
you ridden it yourself versus just understanding it intellectually. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Is in 2017 I started doing life coaching, and yeah, the rest is kind of history, where it's like I have clients who are struggling with what they're struggling with, which is just all the different challenges in life, all the different emotions that are really intense coming up or holding them back or causing them to act in ways they don't want to, and just releasing it, because most people aren't aware that they actually have control over their emotions, their thoughts, and their actions in life. Because typically people think they're at the whim of their subconscious mind when they really don't have to be.
For the 10-day retreat that you had, you talked about how long you had to meditate for and the things that came up. If someone were going through that, can you talk about what, they would see, like what was like that daily life looking like for that retreat?
Mm. Yeah, it was pretty fascinating. It was a different experience than I ever thought I would do, because I remember the first time it came up, it was actually earlier in the year, that year, and it was probably like 8 months beforehand. Somebody had told me they went on this retreat, and I was like, oh my God, like I could never imagine doing that. But then because it was in my mind, I'm like, oh, this could be cool, And then eventually I'm like, I think I can do that. But the funny thing is, I had never meditated before, when I heard about that retreat. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to practice. So I practiced. I got up to 2 hours, got up to 4 hours, and 4 hours was the max that I had done before jumping into the retreat. And then it was 10 hours a day for 10 days. And I remember being apprehensive, especially that you couldn't look at each other, like look at each other in the eye, but you had like roommates, you had like a kind of like a dorm full of people, but everybody was there for the same reason, just to meditate. And you couldn't talk to each other, you couldn't interact in any way. You literally had to pretend that nobody was there. So basically, the crazy part is that I actually drove a couple girls to the place because it was kind of in a remote location. And so we get there and there's a whole bunch of people, like we're all having fun, we're all making friends. And then suddenly they're like, hey, we're doing it now. No more talking, no more looking at each other, no more interacting. It was like, well, this is really weird. Like it was really weird. But the things I realized about myself were fascinating, because I realized like how uncomfortable I was not interacting. Like when there were people around, because I'm the kind of person, no matter who's around me, I'm always wanting to make sure they're okay. Like for example, I'll smile at people as I walk down the street. But like, and then I would notice myself having the thought or the prompt to do that, but I couldn't do that because obviously, because I'm there. So just the little nuances, the little things that you normally would do that you can't do. And then just going back to the silence, and then what you're supposed to do for the first, I think 3 days, you're supposed to just focus here on just the spot below at the bottom of your nose where you're breathing in and out. You just focus on there and breathe in and out, focus on that spot, breathing in and out for that 3 days. And then they teach you the actual Vipassana meditation, which is paying attention to the sensations that happen throughout your body, which is actually kind of a base for how I do my processes with clients, kind of like the same type of meditation type thing, because everything that happens within our body is subconscious. So there's a reason why everything happens. So this kind of touches on that realm, the subconscious realm. So anyway, so we would wake up 4 a.m. every morning, which is the one part I wasn't pumped on. Not a super early morning person. And we would have the choice at different times of day to either meditate with the group in the hall or meditate in our room by ourselves. And so just depending on preference, you had the choice. And then every couple hours you had to go into the hall with everybody.
Mm.
So, and then there would be instructions given. You'd sometimes watch a video about what to do, and they would kind of take you deeper into and just make sure that you're able to do the things that they're trying to get you to do, the certain meditation styles. But essentially, when you're in that environment, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to escape, I suppose, for anything that comes up.
Mm.
So I would say it, from what I've heard, just like with mine, it's very typical that about a third of the people don't make it to the end. And that's about what it was for my group too. They didn't make it to the end because like you'd be in the hall and then suddenly someone would burst out into tears and just like crying profusely. But it's because as you are paying attention to the subconscious stuff within you, you're tapping into memories, you're tapping into that subconscious part. And sometimes what you're tapping into is emotions. And because our thoughts are tied to our emotions, just and those are tied to trauma or past experiences, that kind of thing, which again touches on what I do. So people would be tapping into things, touching on these things, and yeah, emotions would come up and they burst out into tears. And if people aren't used to that, then that can be quite intense. And maybe they don't know what exactly is going on, why they're bursting out into tears, because a lot of people go on these retreats. I call them retreats. I don't know if I'd really say it's a retreat, but yeah, so a lot of people don't realize and they're like, oh, I can do it, right? It's kind of a challenge, but for me, I knew already like the subconscious realm. So I knew what I was tapping into when I did. So really for me, it was like, I just had 10 days to play,
Mm.
like play internally, like it's
Mhm.
like, okay, this is, prime ground for me to just just allow whatever needs to come up because I had gone through what I'd gone through, with that life shift. So it's like, yeah, just being able to release whatever I needed to release. And yeah, as the days went on, yeah, definitely released a lot. But it wasn't anything new for me. And I really enjoyed it. I just remember, yeah, I enjoyed the entire thing. I remember the only thing I didn't like again was the 4 a.m.s, but and then we all had to go to bed, I think at like 9:30 or something. But you weren't even allowed to bring a journal or a pen to write anything. You weren't allowed to I don't remember all the restrictions, but there were quite a few restrictions because you just had to be you in solitude.
Mm.
You couldn't distract yourself with anything. You couldn't even bring your own food. They provided the food because it was all natural, good food. So, and then when you go and eat, everybody has to eat by themselves. So they had like at the beginning when we first got there, there were tables set out in the center and everyone was conversing there. But then they took those tables away during the actual, 10 days and they pulled out this um I want to say like a shelf, cafeteria style shelf on the circumference of the room, the walls, so that everyone had to kind of sit at this shelf and face it and just eat there because you're alone that way and you're not distracted by anybody. So it was a really interesting experience. By the end of it, actually, it was the last day, and I remember it was the last meditation, and I was just like, it just, it was so peaceful. I remember personally being like, I don't even want to go back. Like, I was thinking about how chaotic it was going to be to go back to work and all this stuff. And I'm like, I am just so at peace right now. Like, I don't even want to. And then, getting back into daily life, that was challenging. That was probably the most challenging. If I could recommend anything, give yourself some buffer time because going from silence for 10 days and no interaction to, the hustle and bustle of daily life is, especially work, is a little bit extreme. So, yeah.
So after you finished your 10-day retreat, did you continue that 10 plus hour meditation?
Yeah, so I meditated quite heavily, quite extensively. I think that was in 2019, um, or maybe end of 2018. I think it was about a year until I ended up leaving my corporate job. And then I had taken a year and a half off and doing the 10 plus hours a day. Funny enough, I left my job. a couple months went by and I'm like, you know what? I just want to become like a monk on a mountaintop. I want to go into fear of judgment. I want to go into fear of being alone and fear of all this, whatever came up. And so it was mid-January 2020, where I'm like, I'm going to self-isolate just like a monk on a mountaintop and just go into everything. And then I think it was a month or two later, then everyone had to isolate because it was COVID. I was
Hmm.
like, well, this is so much easier for me now. So it was great. But yeah, ironic how that worked out. But yeah, that 10 plus hours a day was from that point onward. And yeah, there were some pretty fascinating things I found internally.
For someone who's not necessarily looking to do it for 10 hours a day, or somebody who maybe they're inspired by this podcast and they want to start meditating, what are some simple ways that people can start to meditate?
Yeah, so I actually have a video. It's a short video I have on my YouTube channel. I barely have any videos on my YouTube channel, just a caveat there. But if anyone wants to look it up, they can. So essentially, meditation is either you are focusing all of your attention on one thing or on nothing. So one thing that I like to say to people who are beginning, if they want to just try it out, is well, just plan it out throughout the day, maybe have an alarm. And, or even just right now, like if we were to do this right now, say, take 10 seconds to not think. And if you just don't think, and you'll notice that you'll try to not think, but then you'll kind of internally, I want to in quotes, see or sense, or however you become aware of thoughts. You'll be saying, you know, I'm not going to think for, I'm going to turn my mind off, focus on nothing for 10 seconds. And then you'll notice, you'll become aware of, hey, there's a thought, and you'll see it. And then another thought, and you'll see it. And you look at it and you just go, okay, I'm not going to think. And you just do it again. And even if like you fail, I know people are like, I'm not good at it. It's like, well, it takes practice. So do it once. It's only 10 seconds, and then maybe set your alarm for, every couple hours in a day, and just do that. The easiest thing in the world, just 10 seconds. And you'll find you're building that muscle, you're flexing that muscle, and it'll get easier and easier. The way that I personally do it, like for client work and stuff, my thing is to target, so to focus on something. Focus on, like, if say somebody has a problem in their life, then I would say, okay, think of the problem and then say, where do you feel a negative emotion in your body? And people don't typically pay attention to that. And then I'll get them to describe the emotion. Is it heavy, light, moving, still? Does it have a color? And then focus all of your attention on that. And then the thing is, with problems in our lives, there's always an underlying subconscious component, subconscious structure that's keeping it in place or perpetuating it or creating it in the first place. And so when you focus on it, you're essentially taking your normal patterned response to that problem or to that subconscious emotion, that negative emotion, which is, I don't want to feel it. You try to run from it. You try to push it away. You try to control it. And that's why people never get past their negative emotions. You need to go into it.
Mm.
And so that's the form of meditation that I was doing for that year and a half. And what I teach people is, you want to focus on the negative emotion. It's just a sensation. And you put all of your awareness on it, get curious about it. And even just getting curious about it is changing the neurosynaptic pathway that is holding that in place in your nervous system. So anytime you change anything, it's that neuroplasticity, because your neurology, your neurosynaptic pathways are tied to the neurochemical response in your body. And that neurochemical response is that feeling. So just that's the type of meditation that I do and teach, is focus on the feeling and get curious about it and just allow it to be there, and it will dissipate. And that's what I was doing in Vipassana as well.
So, what are some of the benefits of meditation?
The ones that I do, well, okay, I would say all meditation has the benefit of you being able to control your mind in a way that you can direct your focus. It has less clutter. Like, for example, when I say don't think of anything for 10 seconds, you'll notice, hey, there's a thought. Hey, there's a thought. So you start to become aware of how your thoughts kind of intrude on you. And then when a thought comes up, you might have a feeling come up in your body that's tied to that thought, because our memories are tied to past experiences, which are tied to that neurochemical response in our body or the emotion. So then you start to pay attention to, okay, this thought is, me worrying, and it's tied to this feeling of worry in my body. And then you can track it there and release it through that awareness, through meditating on the feeling, being okay with it, and not running from it, not doing your, typical patterned response to change that pathway. So the benefit to me is just you become a lot more mindful of what's happening internally and not so focused on just running from your emotions, essentially, because that's the worst thing you could possibly do is run from your emotions, suppress them, whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would say probably the ultimate thing is just becoming more mindful and aware, consciously aware. And that's the key, consciously aware, because we're always aware at a subconscious level. But when we feel these feelings or notice these thoughts, it's like, oh, yeah, I recognize that. I've had that my whole life.
Mhm.
And the only reason you've not gotten rid of it is because you haven't taken the time to sit with it. And yeah, then you release all that you can release. It honestly is the key to life ultimately, in my opinion.
Mm, interesting. So meditation is the key to life.
I would say meditation is the key to understanding your internal world, and your internal world transpires into what you are or aren't able to achieve or accomplish in life. Um, for example, I used to be terrified of speaking in meetings. I used to be terrified of
Mm,
public speaking. And so at my corporate job, I would never speak up. And in every meeting, I would kind of beat myself up. I'd be like, why didn't I say that when someone said something I knew? Or I'd know something and I'd be like, oh, I'm too scared to say it. And I would go through this whole thing in my mind until I realized, okay, it's all about emotions. And then I focused on the emotion, the fear that I was feeling every time it happened. And I did this kind of work on it. And then this was when I was first starting to do this kind of work. And then within 2 days, I released that emotion. And then suddenly I was an all-star in all of my meetings. I was leading all of my meetings. And
mhm,
that got to the point where I was getting promoted in all these different ways because they're like, oh, she's a leader. Oh, she's doing this, she's doing this. And that's purely because I was willing to go into these uncomfortable emotions that needed to be processed. It's
mhm,
literally like anything you want to do in life. If you're not doing it, you have an internal obstruction, you have some kind of subconscious block. Remove the block and you'll move forward. Of course, you're going to have something else come up down the road, but then
mhm.
you know what to do about it. You just find the block, release it, and then move forward. It's absolutely fascinating, and that's pretty much where I've come to since 2017. So it's all worth it, even though it was very, very challenging.
So how else outside of the meditation factor, how else do you help process individuals' subconscious blocks? How do you work through that?
I would say, so one other thing that I really like to use is metaphor. So in hypnotherapy, you learn a lot about metaphor. Um, I'm just trying to think. So, like, for example, have you ever had a conversation with someone and you're both like trying to get your point across, but you just aren't seeing eye to eye, and it's like, why? But then you throw a metaphor in there, and it's like, oh, I get it. It's
Hmm.
kind of like the bike thing I said earlier. It's like, conceptually learning to ride a bike versus doing it yourself. You're much more able to teach someone. And if I were to say to you, oh, it's just like riding a bike. You just have to get on, get going, and you'll kind of be wobbly at first, but eventually you'll get your rhythm and you'll keep going, and then you'll be able to, do it enough times and you'll get faster. So that's an example of using metaphor in language, because conversational hypnosis is another thing that I do, is just understanding what the subconscious mind needs in order to move past obstacles. The problem is that most people out there only speak through their conscious mind, and they don't understand that 95% of our thoughts and our actions in life are subconscious.
Hmm.
So, speaking the language of the subconscious mind is key, which is metaphor, which is emotions, also how we internally represent things. So, this is getting into neurolinguistic programming, which is like when you think of a memory, if it's a good memory, you will visually, well, potentially, not everybody is aware of their visual, like internal mind's eye. But as an example, we have all the same five senses internally as we have externally. So, for example, if I were to say, imagine yourself brushing a carpet with your left hand. Now imagine the carpet is wet as you're brushing the carpet with your left hand. It's like you can internally understand what I'm saying by internally kind of experiencing that.
Mm.
And if I say, what does a strawberry smell like? You have an internal sense. So
Hmm.
you have internal everything, like you have visual, you also have feeling, olfactory, gustatory, and auditory. So all of your five senses. So essentially, it's with NLP, you learn what's called submodalities, which means you learn how people subconsciously code these different experiences in their life. Like when I was saying, when you think, like right now, for example, how about this? Um, think of a really happy experience from your past. So when you think of that experience, where do you feel the sensation of happiness within your body?
My chest, my
Okay.
shoulders, my eyes.
And it's all the same feeling?
Yeah.
Okay. And if it had a color, what color would it be?
Pink.
Okay. And is it moving or is it still?
It's kind of wiggling
Okay. Like left to right kind of thing?
up and down.
Up and down. And is it heavy or is it light?
It's light.
Okay. So that's how you're subconsciously coding that that memory, that flavor of happiness, that sensation of happiness. So I can say the same thing about a negative memory. We won't go there because it'll put you in a negative state and we want that. But so when you think of that positive memory, so think of that positive memory again. And as you do, you can also pay attention to what other senses are at play when you think of that memory. So as you thought of that memory, I saw that you looked to the right, and that is also indicative of what you're accessing within your mind. So there's something called visual eye accessing cues, which tell people, if they're looking a certain way, they're accessing visual representation. If they're
Mm.
looking down, they're feeling like that kind of thing. So essentially, every sense we have internally is utilized in our memories and in our coding of our experience and in our coding of these subconscious blocks of, for example, if you have a goal that you want to achieve in life, but you're not achieving it, it's because there's something subconsciously standing in your way. And if you think about that goal, that's for me the best way to identify, to find the subconscious block, I call it, which is just that subconscious part of you that is stopping you from achieving it because there's some kind of negative association tied to going forward with that. So we basically, over the course of our lives, we come up with, based on our past experience, we come up with positive and negative associations that we tie to different experiences. And our memories of that are held subconsciously within our bodies through those five senses. And so when, like, for example, say you're a baby and you see a hot stove and you go to touch the hot stove and you do, and then you burn yourself and it's like, ow. And then for the rest of your life, you're like, I'm not going to touch that hot stove because you
Hmm.
know it means danger. You don't
Hmm.
even have to think about it. You see it, you get a feeling like, oh, I don't want to go near that, right?
Yeah.
And but then the same thing, like say you're a kid and I don't know, something positive happens, like candy. Oh, I love candy. You have a positive association to candy.
Mm.
And so, candy becomes a soothing mechanism. And
Mm.
so basically we have positive and negative associations that we build up subconsciously with over the course of our lives. And as our lives go on, these can either move us towards or away from the things we do or don't want to pursue. And so essentially what I do is dissect what is happening, where are the blocks, and how are those turning into full-blown subconscious patterns that are playing out in someone's life, that are basically hindering them and stopping them from being all that they want to be and doing all that they want to do.
Interesting. How do you work through, let's say they have a goal and then there's the subconscious block in front of it. How do you work through that so they can actually achieve the goal?
Mm-hmm. So essentially, I get them to think of the goal. So if, for example, say you think of a goal right now that you want to achieve, and this is just one way to do it. There's multiple ways to kind of go in, but this is kind of my go-to because it's so simple for people. So you think of the goal that you want to achieve, and as you're focusing on that goal, where do you feel resistance in your body telling you that's never going to happen? I'm not good enough, self-doubt, fear, because oh well, if I take that leap, then I lose my security, and I know what
Mm,
that's like.
yeah.
So essentially you feel into where is your subconscious mind telling you moving towards that thing you want equals danger. Because if you at 95% of what we do is
Mm,
subconscious. So if that 95% of you is saying don't go there, then the 5% has no chance. You can put your conscious intention to things as much as you want, but you will not move forward unless you feel safe about it. There's too much negative associated with it. So for me, I go into the feeling, we go through meditation, we use the metaphors. I have a ton of different modalities at this point that I use, but essentially it's about removing the root of that subconscious block. And I typically again go in through feeling, and then you release that and then you see what else is there. There could be a secondary gain, like some other reason that you're holding it in place, so you have to like again speak the language of a subconscious mind in order to actually remove everything that's there. And then without those negatives, without basically having that obstruction in place internally, you'll just do it because that's something that you're passionate about. But in NLP, you can also amplify states, which is like what's called anchoring. So it's kind of like when you think about an anchor, so essentially, if you imagine yourself smelling something that when you smell it, it reminds you of something from when you were little. So that's an anchor tied to scent. So the memory is tied to the scent. So an anchor is just you're tying one of your senses to another sense or an action essentially.
mhm. Okay.
So you can use that to amplify a positive state to going to the gym. Like if there's something you really, really, really love doing, you can find that state and you can kind of overlay it on top of going to the gym if you didn't want to go before, for example. So there's other stuff that you
Mm.
can do as well. Yeah, but essentially the biggest part is removing the obstruction, and then typically people are okay with going.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if there's a task or a goal that you have that maybe you're not in the mood to do that right now, but you know you have to have the discipline to continuously show up for it, you can take one of those positive anchors, those positive memories, and kind of put it on top of the idea of what this goal is. And even though you don't want to do it, you know you have to. And by attaching those two memories together, it's going to help you become more disciplined and actually follow through with it.
Yeah, yeah. Although the a big key of it also is when you like just in the language there, it's like I want to do this thing, but or sorry, say go to the gym. I want to go to the gym, but I don't actually want to do it in that moment. So for me, the very first step would be feel into the feeling of not wanting to do it.
Mm,
So it's like a feeling of laziness. It's a feeling of disdain for the gym. It's a feeling of whatever. That is what's blocking. So I find with other practitioners who are just starting out, they might overlay that positive feeling on top and go, hey, why didn't it work? And it's like, well, you didn't remove what was blocking them in the first place. There's something
mm.
there. And so uncovering what that is and unraveling it so that it kind of disintegrates so that it's not there anymore is very, very key to actually getting that outcome.
So, in a way, it's like you're painting a new wall. And in order to paint
Mhm.
this new wall, you have to remove the wallpaper first. You can't just paint over the wallpaper.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And I can see why, because again, you have to confront the problem. You have to confront that negative feeling and
Hmm.
association that you have or that self-doubt that you have
Yeah.
in order to move forward. And that's very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Because every single thing that our subconscious mind brings up, it's doing it for a reason and it's doing it with a positive intention. So, like for example, I'll try to shorten this story as much as I can, but essentially I was traveling one day, met someone who was very curious about NLP. And he's like, I was like, okay, I'll do a process on you. What problem do you have? And so he started talking, and he couldn't go to the gym. He couldn't get himself to, even though 10 years ago he was always at the gym and super built. And he couldn't figure out why all of a sudden he wasn't able, like he couldn't get himself. He's like, I just don't have the motivation. And I was like, okay, well, it's probably not motivation, but let's go into it. It turns out, after doing a lot of digging, it turns out that he had a wife who a few years prior had been, I don't remember if she was in an accident or if it was some kind of degenerative thing, but she was in a wheelchair. And so he was taking care of her, loved her more than anything. Um, but when he thought about going to the gym, it turns out at a subconscious level, when we got down to the crux of the issue, it turns out that he had a fear of going to the gym. When we went into the fear, it turns out the fear was there because when he used to go to the gym, he looked really, really built and good. And
Mm.
he was scared that if he went to the gym and got built like he was, he would end up being looked at by all these beautiful women and that he might end up not being faithful to his wife, who he loved very, very much and didn't want to do that to. So subconsciously, this was going on. He had no idea. He's like, why can't I go? Why can't I go? But when you go to the underlying issue, there's so much more at play. And when he realized that, he's like, holy crap, that makes so much sense now. And so then he became consciously aware of why he wasn't doing the thing. And at that point, then he has conscious control again. He has choice. So he can still choose, I'm going to be okay, or work out any issues about whatever else there might be. Or just, work out at home or in different ways. He has that conscious awareness to make an informed decision at that point. And also it prompted him to, decide at a conscious level, do I want to stay with my wife? Is this the most important thing to me? Because there's a part of me that's maybe thinking about this. So why is there a part of me still thinking about this? Is there an unfulfilled aspect or,
Mm.
something? So there's always so many different things at play at a subconscious level. And really awareness is all it takes to unravel it and get past whatever it is so you can make that informed decision.
If someone were starting to have this awareness that they need to make a change in their life, what's the easiest way they can start?
I would say, like, sorry, getting the awareness to, sorry, can you clarify?
So somebody decided, hey, I need to make a change in my life. I have this problem. Maybe they don't know what it is, or maybe they do, and they want to, make that change in their life. What's the easiest, technique that they can do to
Mm,
help them start or be that beginning thing, that beginning step? What would that be?
So definitely, hands down, meditation is just sit in silence, close your eyes, think of what you want to do, feel into where you feel a negative resonance, a resistance in your body, and then sit with it, get curious about it, don't avoid it because it is part of you. You subconsciously put that feeling there. And so it's just coming up because there's something that you need to know, something you need to look at if you want the answers. The answers are always all inside of you. Nobody else has the answers. And it's funny, we're taught to look outside of us for the answers, but that's never where they come from because we're so unique to what we need, right?
Mhm.
So sit with those feelings, just feel them. Again, get curious, bring your awareness to the entire sensation. And the thing that I typically say to people to start is there's a technique that I like to give to people who are beginning, and it's very powerful. It's actually what I used in that story to release that fear of speaking in meetings. So it's called Ho'oponopono. And what it is when you find that negative feeling, first of all, when you find it, kind of try to discern what emotion is it and just sit with it. Don't think because your mind is not necessary. And that's where people get caught up is that their thoughts come and then they go on tangents in their mind. And that takes them away from feeling the feeling because there's something uncomfortable in the feeling. So just every time you become aware of your thoughts pulling you in a direction, stop the thought, refocus your attention on what you're feeling. And so Ho'oponopono is you say 4 phrases to the feeling, because if it has anything to do with, like, I guess, self-doubt or any kind of inner trauma, you want to give it love. Because whenever we have trauma from our past, it's because something is unresolved. Typically, if we have an experience where something bad happened to us and there wasn't somebody to make us feel better or tell us it's okay, that's why it gets trapped within our nervous system. But we can do that for ourselves. So essentially what you're doing is you're tapping into that trauma or whatever it happens to be. Like maybe it's an inadequacy within you, like I'm not good enough to pursue this thing. So then you would feel that feeling and you would say to it 4 phrases. You would say, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And just say those phrases to that feeling. I know it sounds weird, but say those phrases to that feeling and do it a few times. And then you'll notice that one of the phrases resonates more with the feeling. And then you'll drop the other phrases and you'll just say that one phrase to the feeling. And you'll keep saying it while focusing all of your intention, all of your attention on the feeling. And just keep doing that. And don't let your thoughts pull you. Just keep saying it to the feeling. And as you do, you'll notice the feeling will shift. The sensation of the negative emotion will shift. The more you sit with it, it'll shift to the point where it will dissipate, unless there are secondary things holding it in place, which there might be, but you will still notice it shift. So just sit with it, and then you can always jump into those other areas as well and do the same thing for those. But this is the main technique that I teach at first, is because this was the big one that I spent most of my time utilizing during those years when I was going into stuff. Because I did know multiple techniques, but until I got into the meditation realm, um, they were very like heavy. They were very overly convoluted. And I found that the content, the past, the experience, that wasn't necessary. So I dropped all that using anything to do with what's in my mind and just focused on the feeling. And simple techniques like this are all you really need, because giving love, some form of love to a feeling, is essentially speaking the language of the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind is feelings. So that's essentially why it works.
So can you just say those 4 things again? You said hello, I love you, I'm
Oh,
sorry,
it's
forgive me.
I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you.
Oh, so I love you. Can you say okay, one more time? I love you.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
please forgive me,
Please forgive me.
and thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think
And then
that's
for me, sometimes I tell people also, you can also, depending on the results you're getting, you could also add in a fifth one, which is, let me just think, I forgive you.
mm,
So it's the flip. It's not the official meditation that way, but I add that in because sometimes it resonates more with people.
hmm
Yeah, but very, 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 very powerful.
hmm So you said earlier that 10 seconds is a good starting point for meditation. Is there a cap or a goal that maybe they should be reaching to really maximize the benefits of meditation?
I would say just it really depends on the person and what their intention is. Um, for me, I had a lot of reason to meditate because of all the negative feelings that came up in me, and I was looking to process them out. So I would say for anybody who is in the same boat, if they have consistent negative emotions that they really just don't know what to do with, and they're always there, do this process. You will have results. I guarantee that, and just keep doing it. Like whenever, honestly, the way I say it to some people is like it almost becomes like a game, like a video game or something, where it's like, this is what I love to do because it's helping me at the same time that it's relaxing, and I'm learning so much about myself. Because when you uncover something that's been subconscious your entire life, it's like, that's why I did that.
Mm,
That's what was holding me back. And it's like, I don't have to be that person anymore. I don't have to do that anymore. And it's like, I remember releasing one particular thing where it was like this feeling of weakness that I had every day of my life. And I remembered it was like this was like this fog that was looming over me always. And it felt like I was a weak person. And I remember I found that specific sensation and I was ready to let it go. And then I was like, I had this thought, I'm like, oh my God, who would I be if I'm not this person? And
Mm.
then I had the thought of, why do I want to be this I don't want to be weak. Like, I don't want to be this weak person that, like this victim.
Mhm.
And so then in that moment, I'm like, okay, I'm okay to release it. But you'll notice that, like, it's like, how they say the only thing to fear is fear itself.
Mhm.
It's literally our internal fear that is telling us to be afraid of it. And that is just a sensation. And so, just like that weakness, I had made that a part of me over the course of my life. I thought that was who I was, that identity. And it essentially, that part of me was making me think, if I don't have that, who will I be? I'll be nothing. But really, letting go of that meant I'm just not that weak person. And so again, that's that flip, that's that conscious decision. You become aware of what you've been doing at a conscious level, and then you can let it go. Yeah.
So much value in everything that you've said.
Thank you.
But we are getting near the end of the episode. So I'm going to ask you three final questions, which I ask all the guests. And so
Okay.
these three questions are over the topic of what this podcast is all about, which is live, love, and grow.
Okay.
The first question I have for you is, what advice can you share about how to create a life that leaves a positive impact on the world?
I would say follow your passions, even if it's scary. Go into the fear and release the fear and move forward. Because I firmly believe that I've read a lot on the evolution of consciousness, and it's like the lower levels are survival. Every man for themselves, or woman or whatever, for themselves. And then as you go up the scale of consciousness, you become more and more selfless, essentially, and you want to contribute and grow. You want to contribute to society beyond yourself. And so I find that the key to that is following your passion, because if you don't, you'll stifle who you are. You'll start to hate life, hate yourself. You'll have a heaviness to life. And that's essentially what I had, is I wasn't following my authentic passions, essentially. And so once you do that, or if you consistently follow your passions, then you're pretty much going to be happy, in life. And then as happy people are more, I guess, positive towards others as well, and are more into contributing, like
Mhm.
it's like if we feel lack, we feel like we have to take. If we feel abundance, we feel like we can give.
Mm.
So I think really it's about finding your passion. Don't let your inner world stop yourself. Don't let the outer world stop you based on your inner world. Just move forward in the way that you want to.
Love that. The second question I have is, what are some practical ways people can cultivate self-love?
I would say, like, touching on everything that we've talked about, it's if you were to look in the mirror and say to yourself, I love myself, or even just say it now, I love myself, and close your eyes, you'll feel resistance if you don't believe it. And that's again your subconscious mind going, no, you don't. So say it, feel it, go into those emotions, find out what's there, what's behind them, and do the technique that we talked about, and just keep doing that. Do it, make it a practice, and you will remove what is obstructing your ability to have that self-love. Because it's not like, thinking about a baby doesn't have no self-love. They're just happy, right? Or well, I
Hmm.
mean, unless they're not happy, but typically. Yeah, so I would say, yeah, just remove what's obstructing it. And I think that's our innate selves, is love at our essence, at a soul level.
The third and final question I have is, what is one actionable tip someone can do today to grow 1% better?
Mm. I would say same kind of thing. Like use that technique. Find your blocks, find your negative emotions, and go into them, release them. Um, spend enough time and you will become, I don't want to say better, but you will become the person that you truly want to be. If you become aware enough of what is inhibiting you from being that authentic version of you, being that full of life, love, passionate version of you, then you can remove what is obstructing that and then move forward, and you can become a whole other person that you never thought you even could be, or maybe that you dreamed of being.
Hmm. How can people connect with you?
So I am on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well. But I have a website, so nikkinicholas.com, nikkinicholas.com. And they can email me through there. I also actually, I think I sent it to you. I also have a free gift to anyone listening. So essentially, I think it's a 10-minute video training to help you understand where subconscious blocks come from, what they're doing exactly and how they work, and then how you can find them within yourself. So just a quick training if anyone wants to jump on it. But I think we'll have that in the show notes, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's a
perfect.
fantastic gift. Um,
Awesome.
and how can people support you on your journey?
I would say just tell people, spread the word about me, what I do. I've been doing this forever, but I just jumped online, I think a year ago. So Instagram and YouTube are small right now, but Facebook, I'm building that. That's my main place that I go. But really just spread the word, and if you know of anybody who is into this kind of thing or needs help in any way, just let them know, kind of, yeah, or follow me on different platforms.
Awesome. Well, Nikki, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come here and teach this audience how they can overcome their own subconscious blocks and talking about meditation because I also know how important that is to just begin, 10 seconds, 5 minutes, 1 minute, whatever that is, just to start doing that because you really reap the benefits of doing that continuously. And I just want to
Yeah.
acknowledge you for all the hard work that you've been putting in helping people. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying. It was really, really nice to chat. Really great conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast. I hope you took something away from this episode that you can implement today just like I did. Nikki provided a lot of valuable information. I'd love to know what your biggest takeaway was from this episode. Let me know by sharing this episode in your Instagram stories and tag me at Matt Fendora. If you enjoyed hearing from Nikki today, then you're in luck because next week we have a double header with her. Next week, she will be back on our first episode on spirit. If you've enjoyed this episode, the ones before, and or you're looking forward to future episodes, please hit that subscribe or follow button. It helps me get this information to even more people. No matter what you choose to do, choose to live, love, and grow. Thank you, and have an outstanding day.